Solving the Rubik's Cube blindfolded is one of the most impressive things a Speedcuber can do. But is it really that hard? Well, in this video, we're going to find out exactly how a Speedcuber solves the Rubik's Cube blindfolded. Now, I will give a disclaimer, this video is not a tutorial. So what I'd recommend is try and grasp the understanding of how it works rather than exactly what's happening in each step. And yeah, I promise that you will actually walk away from this being inspired to learn how to solve the cube blindfolded, because it genuinely is not as hard as you think. So first off, I'd like to start the video by debunking a pretty big myth about blindfolded solving, which is that we go and memorize every single face of the cube independently. So that is not how it works. Usually in blindfolded solving, the memorization technique is tracing. What I mean by that is we pick a fixed location on the cube and we trace where the pieces go from that location. So first off, there are two kinds of pieces. So there's corners and there's edges. So the centers are fixed, so we don't really care about them as much. If I say this is my location that's fixed, first of all, this is called the buffer. So my buffer sticker would be something like this, for example, this sticker right here. And I would just trace where that has to go. So blue, orange, white, for example, needs to go between the blue, orange, white centers right here. And then that has to go here. This has to go here. This has to go here. This has to go here, and so on. Now you might be wondering, how on earth do we remember these locations? Well, this is where something called a lettering scheme comes into play. In particular, we use something called the Speps lettering scheme, which is the most common. The Speps lettering scheme basically assigns a letter in a clockwise order from the top left of each face. And it's very simple. It's just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and so on around the rest of the cube. So all the way up to X. And the same thing for the edges. So basically, every single location in the cube has a letter corresponding to it. And yes, there are edges and corners that share the same letter, but you will memorize them separately anyway. Now, of course, there's a bunch of different memorization techniques that I won't get into in this video. In this video, I'm just going to show you how we do it. So just as an example here on the corners, I would just see this is R, and then R goes to L, L goes to H, H goes to P, P goes to W, and then W goes back to my buffer, so I do something called a cycle break. Again, this is just a nuance of the blindfolded solving method, so don't worry about it. So I go B, B goes to D, D goes to N. So that's it. That's all my corners done. And it's really easy for me to remember this string of 8 letters as letter pairs. So I would just go left, right, and then horsepower, and then Warner Brothers, and then Den. So yeah, very simple to remember. And for the edges, we'd probably just use like an audio-based memory technique, since that's more letters and you want that in a shorter term memory. Now, the usual way a Speedcuber does this is they memorize the corners and then memorize the edges, and then they execute the edges and then execute the corners. But now you might be wondering, how do you execute it if you're not even looking at the cube? Like, what are you actually doing to solve it? It's really simple when you get used to the letter pairs and when you get used to seeing where the letters are and visualizing what piece goes where. So when it comes to execution, there's a couple of different things that Speedcubers do. Now what I'm going to explain is the 3 different tiers I would put this into of blindfolded solving: the beginner level, the intermediate level, the advanced level, and then the ultra advanced level, which even I'm not at, so I can't really talk much about it, but we'll get there. So starting out with the very basic beginner method for blindfolded solving, you actually just solve one piece at a time. And in fact, you only use 1 or 2 algorithms at most. So for example, if I were to pick edges, I would pick, let's say this is my buffer. I would have a target sticker where I shoot every piece to, and then I would do an algorithm that swaps my target with my buffer, and then I would undo the setup. In this case, for example, I see green orange is this sticker. So what I can do here is, you guys probably already know this, but the T-perm on the Rubik's Cube basically swaps these 2 corners and these 2 edges. And now looking just at edges, this is our important part because it swaps these 2 edges. So thinking about it in this context, if I have my buffer here and I know that this can only swap with this with a T-perm, then what I can do is set up whatever location this is going to, which is in this case here, up to that, and then just do the T-perm and then reverse that. So that solves that edge. So you might have noticed that this is a really simple thing, because now this just means I can replicate this for everything. So here, red, blue, I know it has to go here. So I can set this up to come here. Now remember, I can't disturb these pieces because the T-perm affects these 4 pieces. So I'll probably do something like this, and then this is a T-perm. So that solves that piece. Like, that's literally all there is to edges. Like, you just keep doing T-perms. You keep setting up different locations to this target. You have a buffer and a target. The T-perm shoots the buffer to the target. You undo the setup and that piece is solved. And how do you trace? Well, whatever target you shot to, whatever was in that spot now got swapped. So the buffer is now whatever was in your original spot. Now let's skip ahead to the corners. So once your edges are done, it'll look something like this. Now for the corners, a beginner level blindfolded solver would probably do something like this. So if you know what a Y-perm is on the Rubik's Cube, it's very simple. It basically just swaps these 2 corners and these 2 edges. So a Y-perm starts with an F, and then makes the swap. But you will notice something. If you do a Y-perm without an F, like if I don't consider this F, then you will see that it actually swaps these two corners down here and these two edges. And that is the key to the blindfolded solving technique for corners. So if you just do the Y-perm without the F, you get this swap with these two edges swapped. So basically, you might have already guessed it, but you treat this as your buffer and this as your target. And that's it. Buffer and target. This is the swapping algorithm. You always have buffer, target, swapping algorithm. So in this case, if I pick this is my buffer, I know this is U, like this particular sticker. So how would I get this sticker to this spot without affecting these three pieces? It's really intuitive. I can just do an F prime. So once I do the F prime, I do the algorithm, which is a Y-perm without the first F. And then I just reverse the F prime, which is an F. And that solves our corner. So it's really that simple to solve the Rubik's Cube blindfolded as a beginner. Like you just have to do like the T-perm and the Y-perm and the two algorithms you need to know. Now there is a case called parity where you get an odd number of corners. That is of course dealt with a little differently and you have to learn one more alg for it. You can actually use an R-perm for it, which is really funny. Like it's just a combination of PLLs pretty much, but yeah, it's really intuitive. And the reason parity happens is because remember when you're making a swap of edges, you are swapping these two corners, which means that if you ever have an odd number of edge swaps, that means these two corners will be swapped at the end. And that means that you have to unswap them to do the corners. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. That's just how you would continue doing this. So just another example here, this is X. So the way I can get X to this spot, which is my target, is just dF prime, do the algorithm, FD prime. That's it. So that solves that piece. And remember, these are swapping algorithms, so they won't affect any other piece on the cube except these two edges and these two corners. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to the beginner method. And that is how you should start out in blindfolded solving, because it gives you the intuition for the lettering scheme and helps you understand how pieces are moving around the cube even without looking at the cube. But you might have guessed that this is pretty inefficient because it only solves one piece at a time, keeps making the same swap over and over again, and overall will just take you so many moves to finish solving the cube. This is where the intermediate method comes into play. Now this is just another random scramble, but the intermediate method for blindfolded solving is going to solve the edges differently. So now we're still going to be solving one edge at a time, but instead of doing the T-perm every single time, we're going to change our buffer and target. Because you have to realize the T-perm is good for swapping these two pieces, but it keeps swapping these two corners and it also is very long. Another cool way you can do this is actually a method called M2. So M2 in edges is a method where this is the buffer and this is the target. And the swap for these two, the algorithm is just an M2. It's that simple. Like I don't have to do all of a T-perm, literally. I can just do M2. That's a swap. But of course, like it's the same thing. Like it swaps everything in the middle layer. So you have to end on an even number of M2s, or you have parity. That is the thing. But yeah, anyway. So I would go to the buffer and I would see where the buffer has to go. That's an S. Now S is a special case in the M2 method. So I'm just going to change it for the sake of this video. Don't worry about anything. I'm just going to make this the scramble. So here the buffer is white blue and white of white blue in particular, which has to go to here, which is A. Now this is the easiest swapping algorithm because this goes here with just an M2 literally. Now once you do that, this will be in the buffer location. So this is orange green, which is F. So F will be here, like the F, but the F piece will be here. So I'll do M2 for A. And then to solve F, I need to put F in the target location. I can do that with something like BL2 B prime. And then do the M2 again and reverse the setup. And now you'll see I've solved A and F, but all I've done is two M2s basically and some setup moves in between. So as you can see, this is a much more efficient way to do edges. And just fast forwarding through that, you can solve the rest of the edges. So M2 severely reduces your move count, which is a really nice thing. And for corners, I've seen a lot of people learn Orozco, which is another method that reduces, like instead of having to do a Y-perm for all the corners, it reduces your move count again for the corners by moving slightly closer to what is the next concept, which is actually what I suggest you get into if you're going to get into the intermediate or advanced part of blindfolded solving, which is 3-style. 3-style is basically the progression that M2 and Orozco are trying to get to, but it's actually the entire step all the way through. 3-style solves two pieces at a time instead of the old one piece at a time. So remember when we were swapping buffer and target? Yeah, we're no longer doing that. Now we're going to make swaps of two pieces at a time. So this method is called 3-style because it requires the cycling of three pieces for every single algorithm. But this cycle of three pieces will end up solving two, and the third one will be your step into the next part of the cycle of solving pieces. I'm going to choose this as my buffer, let's say, for my edges. So I see this is yellow blue, which has to go here. That's W. And this is green red, which has to go here, which is J. Now, as opposed to the other methods, I would actually do this in one algorithm. Instead of doing two algorithms or thinking about swapping twice, instead of doing W first and then J, WJ becomes my whole swap. So the way I would do WJ is, so in order to solve two pieces at a time, you need something called commutators. A commutator is a sequence of moves that affects only three pieces on the cube. So for example, let's just say I take a corner commutator like this. Like this is GB basically. Shout out Gaurav Bachani. But yeah, this sets up something that is called a commutator. This is going to cycle these three pieces. It's going to send this here and this here. The way it's going to do that is it's going to recognize that we have these two pieces that can be interchanged with this one move. Like this comes here with a U, or this goes there with a U prime. And this piece can enter this area of the top layer with R prime dr. Now it doesn't belong here, it belongs here. So you do the interchange first and then the insertion, and then you undo the interchange and undo the insertion. I would recommend you watch JPerm's 3-style tutorial, or I can make one of my own later on if that's not very helpful, but that is a really helpful tutorial, and I'm saying that because I learned how commutators work through that. So yeah, once you understand interchanges and insertions, that is a complete game changer. So now WJ becomes as simple as this. So that's J and W solved. It's that easy. And now I see DH. So DH is really easy. So I just have to understand that these two interchange with a U, and H can come in with RE prime R prime. So I just see DH and it has to go here. So I will just do this. That solves both D and H. It is undeniably a more efficient method, and I absolutely think anyone can learn it, but it does take a lot of time to learn and a lot of dedication. And then it's really similar for the corners as well. So I would just pick this as my buffer, for example. I'd see this goes to here, which is G, and that goes here, which is T. So G and T is a really easy thing. I can do R prime, and now these are an interchange of D prime or D away, and T has come up here. So R prime U2, and then I just have to insert T to this and this here, and then reverse all of that. So that solves both G and T. So as you can see, this is way more efficient because it solves two pieces at a time. Once you get good at this method, you won't even have to think about the moves, and that's the beauty of it. And now onto the ultra secret and bonus method of this video. So a lot of 3-style users actually use something called floating buffers. Now remember when I said the buffer is a fixed position on the cube? Yeah, well, when you're in the advanced version of this method, you no longer have fixed positions on the cube. The floating buffer allows you to move around your buffer, which means that your algorithm set increases. Like you no longer have to learn it just for one. Like I, for example, use my UF and UFR as my buffer. So these two stickers are my buffers for edges and corners respectively. If you were doing floating buffers, anytime you had a cycle break, you would just move to that buffer, which is pretty insane. If you're going to do full floating, then you have to know every single buffer on the cube, and you need to know where those pieces are. And you need to know the algorithms from those angles, which is pretty insane. Yeah, that's just like the next step after 3-style. That's something that I'm not going to get into at least for like a year or so. With 3-style, I'm pretty much sub 1 at home. In competitions, I get like low 1s, but I still haven't got a good average in comp. Hopefully that changes next month. My recommendation for you is if you are looking to get into solving the cube blindfolded, start with the beginner method, then move on to the intermediate method. And if you're going to learn the advanced method, don't wait. You can't half-heartedly do the advanced method like 3-style. You have to go all in. It is 818 algorithms, but it is 100% worth it, and also most of them are intuitive. There's like just a few non-intuitive algorithms to learn. The real beauty of 3-style is that it helps you understand commutators, and commutators help you understand the cube in a way that you've probably never seen it before. And I physically mean that, like I'm not trying to over-exaggerate here, but yeah. That's pretty much it for this video. So let me know if this video was helpful to you and you now know how Speedcuber solved the cube blindfolded. It's pretty cool, I think, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and peace.